Good morning, friends. The light outside my kitchen window is just finding its manner soft and forgiving, the kind that lets yesterday slide into the sink with the coffee grounds. The kettle is beginning its sleepy hiss, the house is practicing quiet, and maybe you're doing the same, wrapping your hands around a warm mug, letting your shoulders drop half an inch. I'm glad you're here. Here's a bold little truth to stir into that first sip you might not survive if you confuse family with safety. Sometimes the hands that straighten your collar are also the hands that try to sign your name for you. Before we go any further, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I like knowing the map of us. Now dim the lights, let a fan hum if you've got one, and come sit in my kitchen with me. We're going to be gentle with the morning, even as we tell the truth. The knock came before breakfast, one of those brisk, official rhythms that carry the weather of a courthouse. I dried my hands on a dish towel and opened the door to a man with a badge and an apologetic chin. "Ms. Whitfield," he asked, though he already knew. I nodded. He handed me a thick envelope, had me sign a small slab of plastic, then tipped his hat toward the day and walked off like he'd just delivered the forecast. Inside, an emergency petition for temporary guardianship, stamped, tabbed, and humid with urgency. The first page used my name like a traffic cone, bright, cautionary in the way. It claimed I was confused, vulnerable, and unable to manage affairs without significant risk. I snorted so softly only the kettle heard. The petition alleged 3 incidents: wandering after dark, forgetting to pay the electric bill, and leaving a burner on overnight. I've never loved fiction, but I can recognize a genre. Odd fact of the day: ex parte is Latin for from one side, as in a hearing where only one side gets the microphone. Useful when a danger is real, dangerous when the danger is theater. I set the packet on the table, put the kettle on a coaster like it might need support, and read. Whoever drafted the petition liked adjectives alarming, escalating, urgent. A doctor's affidavit appeared on page 7, someone I'd seen recently though. My calendar and my bloodstream disagreed. 2 neighbor declarations were attached in careful, identical language, the way a choir sounds when it's been rehearsed to the edge of believable. Olivia's name was everywhere, of course. My daughter-in-law has a talent for logistics and a passion for narratives, where she is the necessary stage manager of other people's messes. Gabriel. My son was listed as concerned but emotionally conflicted, which is a long way to say present but quiet. The hearing was scheduled for that afternoon due to the grave risk of harm. I checked the stove because humor is a survival skill. Every knob sat politely at off like a choir of zeros. I have stood in enough courtrooms to know the difference between heat and light. This packet had plenty of heat. I looked for light dates, specifics, clarity. In the margins, I started to pencil a timeline the night they say I wandered. I was on a neighborhood Zoom at 8:30 p.m., complaining about the street light that flickers like a disco. The electric bill they say I forgot drafted automatically on the 15th. I remembered the small triumph of setting it up myself. As for the burner, my stove logs usage on a smart plug. I could print the data. The house, bless it, keeps better records than rumor does. Elder wisdom of the day. When panic knocks, put the kettle on and stack the papers. Tea is a ritual. Stacking is a plan. You cannot outshout a lie, but you can out-document it. The petition asked the court to appoint a temporary guardian for me. Olivia recommended herself, generous soul, so that important decisions could be made without obstruction. If you've spent any time near bureaucracy, you know without obstruction is code for without witnesses. I stared at the phrase until it admitted what it meant. Academic phrase to tuck in your pocket. Availability cascade. Say a thing often enough, see it echoed in enough polite places, and it begins to feel true merely because it's nearby. If you don't feed the cascade with facts, you will drown in someone else's adjectives. I made a list small and doable because small and doable wins mornings. Print stove log for the week in question. Pull utility autopay confirmations from email. Screenshot calendar showing the Zoom call. Call Dr. Raman, my actual physician, for a same-day letter. We'd spoken last month about my blood pressure and excellent fondness for leafy greens. Check the front door camera archives for the night I supposedly wandered. 3 jokes to keep the breath from getting stuck. If adjectives were evidence, this petition would be a smoking gun. If concern earned frequent flyer miles, Olivia would be platinum for life. If I really left the burner on all night, my tea kettle would have its own lawyer. I brewed the tea and called Patricia. Every story like this needs one person who says, "I'm on my way," and then does not bring drama. She arrived with a legal pad, 2 working pens, and a bag of lemon cookies that tasted like a harmless afternoon. We read the packet together, spoke in the low voices women use when the air doesn't deserve our volume, and began to separate the parts that required emotion from the parts that required paper. "I can be your second pair of eyes," she said, "and your first pair of eyebrows. Please raise them whenever a sentence needs oxygen," I said. We built a folder labeled "Receipts Not Rumors" and fed it. The smart plug dashboard made a neat graph of stove activity idle overnight, yes ma'am, and a tidy spike at 6:10 a.m. when I boiled water like any citizen of the kettle-owning nation. The electric bill screen showed paid auto pay. I printed the email with its sweet little subject line, "Thanks for your payment," and added a yellow sticky that said, "Machines don't flatter." Zoom sent me a calendar confirmation for the neighborhood meeting, including the topic Streetlight No. 19. Flickering, which reads like a haiku for municipal resignation. The door camera app opened its archive, me at 8:12 p.m., taking the trash to the curb in my robe, waving at the neighbor's cat because I am generous with my greetings. Then nothing, until 6:03 a.m., the paper landing with its reliable thud. The house was a witness, and its memory didn't need a snack break. I kept the strangest page for last, the doctor's affidavit. The name rang no bell. It alleged an exam at a community clinic I do not attend, with findings that read like they'd been downloaded from a template. Poor insight, tangential thought processes, inability to manage IADLs, instrumental activities of daily living, for those lucky enough not to know. Someone had underlined inability to manage finances 3 times, as if enthusiasm could calcify conjecture into proof. I called the listed clinic. The receptionist's voice had that valiant brightness public servants wear, like armor. "We have no record of her as a patient," she said, and I thank the universe for people who answer phones with spreadsheets nearby. I wrote a single sentence on the inside cover of the folder, "Calm is not compliance. Calm is control." Then I highlighted the hearing time 2:00 p.m. and drew a box around it like it was a fragile thing that needed help getting to the car. The kettle whistled again, or maybe that was me. It's hard to tell some mornings. I poured more tea and practiced how I would speak. Not the judge's voice, I set that down when I retired. Not the angry mother's voice either, though it stretched in the wings, eager for a monologue. I practiced the voice I use when the neighbor's kids knock and ask if I can show them how to untangle kite string, even patient amused at complexity, but not confused by it. I am not naive. I know how emergency can flatten nuance and make a courtroom hospitable to adjectives. But I also know how paper and tone can change the air. Procedural justice, that's the academic fight phrase, doesn't mean feelings don't matter. It just means the hallway to fairness is lined with dates, receipts, and a voice that refuses to sprint. At 1:10 p.m., Patricia checked our stack and did the small magic of making it tidy. "You ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," I said, and tucked the folder under my arm like a shield made of trees. I left the house, locked plants, watered, and the kettle off. Documented. The day was bright enough to be unhelpful. I walked to the car on legs that remembered every step I had taken for other people and decided to take this one for myself. 3 more lines scribbled in my notebook before the ignition turned. If rumor is a wildfire, I'm bringing a filing cabinet. If love requires control, it is not love. It is a leash. And me, I am awake, caffeinated, and exactly my size. We drove to the courthouse with the radio low and our spines tall. I have learned that showing up is its own argument. Today, I would show up with a folder that could breathe. Courthouses have their own weather. Even on bright days, the air inside feels overcast, papers rustling like rain shoes, striking tile in little thunderclaps. At the security checkpoint, I placed my folder, Receipts Not Rumors, in a gray bin. The guard glanced at the tabs and gave me the soft nod public servants reserve for people who seem to have packed their dignity on purpose. Patricia peeled off toward the public benches. Eyebrows at the ready, she whispered, tapping her forehead like a salute. I smiled and followed the arrows to Department 4. Olivia was already there, seated front left, the position people assume when they expect to manage the narrative. She wore a jacket the color of authority and a smile the temperature of a refrigerated rose. To her right sat 2 relatives I hadn't seen since a graduation cake in 2009. Now repurposed as a supportive chorus. Gabriel occupied the same row, but a different planet, hands folded, eyes on a spot of wood grain, as if it might explain everything. The clerk called the calendar, voices, case numbers, the warm engine of the day turning over. Our matter was labeled Emergency Guardianship Ex Parte. I wrote the words on my pad and underlined ex parte twice. Odd fact of the day, docket comes from a small bundle of notes, legal weather rolled up for the judge to carry from storm to storm. Today, I plan to send sunshine through that bundle, 1 receipt at a time. The bailiff intoned the rule of phones. The room obeyed. People sat straighter the way humans do when furniture pretends to be moral instruction. When our case was called, Olivia stood at once, prelude to a performance, and I stood too calm as a kettle set to low. Appearances, the judge asked, peering over the rim of readers. "Olivia Whitfield, petitioner," she said smoothly. "I'm here out of concern for my mother-in-law's safety." She let safety rest in the room like a saint. I raised my hand slightly. Nora Whitfield, respondent, appearing prosy. The judge's eyebrows, veteran ones, capable of nuance, tipped upward. "Miss Whitfield, do you intend to proceed without counsel?" "I do, Your Honor," I said. "I'm prepared with exhibits and would appreciate the opportunity to address both urgency and accuracy." He nodded in that judicial way that means, "I see you. Now be useful." Let's begin with petitioner. Olivia presented like a person who had practiced in front of a mirror, blessed by ring light. "Your Honor, over the last month, Nora has demonstrated alarming decline. Wandering at night, confusion about bills, leaving a burner on all night. My husband and I are terrified she'll hurt herself. I filed this only after consulting a physician and 2 neighbors." She placed a hand on a stack of paper as if swearing on a book. The judge turned to me, Miss Whitfield. With the court's permission, I said I'd like to proceed in 3 short steps. First, challenge urgency. Second, check the accuracy of key claims. Third, speak to less restrictive alternatives than guardianship. My voice surprised me by sounding like a patient teacher with a good pen. "Proceed," he said. On urgency, I began sliding Exhibit A onto the rail. For the clerk, the petition cites a burner left on overnight last Tuesday. The attached smart plug log shows 0 stove power draw between 9:00 p.m. and 6:00 a.m., with a spike at 6:10 a.m. for tea. I allowed myself 1 teaspoon of humor. I can subpoena the kettle if necessary. A thread of laughter stitched the back row. Even the judge's mouth twitched. On unpaid electric bill, Exhibit B is the utilities autopay thank you email for the very month alleged. Machines are not sentimental, Your Honor. They announce only what happened. On wandering Exhibit C is time-stamped door camera video me at 8:12 p.m., taking the trash to the curb, then nothing until the morning paper lands. If trash duty counts as wandering, half the city is lost. The judge flipped the pages, that quiet shuff-shuff sound of minds sharpening. He glanced at Olivia. Counselor then remembered she wasn't one. Petitioner. She recovered quickly. These devices can be manipulated. I spoke to a physician who evaluated Nora. There's also corroboration from neighbors about confusion. About that physician, I said, picking up Exhibit D, the affiant lists, a clinic I've never attended. Their records custodian, whose letter is behind the affidavit, confirms I am not a patient. I also submit Exhibit E, a letter from my treating physician, Dr. Rahman, who has known me for 8 years and saw me last month regarding blood pressure. She finds me fully oriented with intact judgment and no concerns about instrumental activities of daily living. Academic phrase for those keeping score: confirmation bias, the tendency to collect evidence that flatters your hypothesis and ignore what contradicts it. I didn't say it out loud. I let the exhibits do that polite, devastating work. The judge's veteran eyebrows performed a small conference with each other. Petitioner, how did you choose this physician? Olivia laced her fingers. Through a community resource. They provide assessments for families in crisis. Name. She offered one. I recognized it as a shiny umbrella organization, lots of mission statements, little staff. The judge made a note. In a courthouse, ink can be a forecast. I continued, not rushing. Your Honor, I don't deny the family is in crisis, just not the kind alleged. We are experiencing an availability cascade, a rumor repeated until it feels true. I can't outshout it, but I can outdocument it. If the court has concern about my safety, I'm open to less restrictive measures. A healthcare proxy on file, I've executed 1 bank alerts already active, and a voluntary check-in schedule with my primary. Guardianship would hand my decisions to a person with a conflict of interest. The judge glanced at Gabriel. Mr. Whitfield, my son stood like a man trying to balance on his integrity after discovering it's made of muscles, not bone. I love my mother, he said. I have been quiet. That's on me. I don't support a guardianship today. His voice wobbled, then held. In my chest, something old and hopeful sat up straighter. Olivia's smile paled. Your Honor. He is not seeing the late-day confusion. With respect, I said that phrase has a clinical cousin sundowning. My doctor's letter notes no such pattern. If petitioner has timestamps to the contrary, I'll respond. Otherwise, concern is doing too much rhetorical work here. 3 jokes, because breathing is important in rooms where oxygen is rationed by tone. If adjectives were evidence, we'd have reached a verdict at the caption. If concern charged rent for all the rooms it occupies, this case would be fully funded. If trash night makes me a wanderer, I expect a tiny stick and a polka dot handkerchief to appear any minute. The clerk tried not to grin. The judge did not try as hard. Miss Whitfield, what's Exhibit F? I slid the final tab forward. A short index of the house's memory. Front door audio clips from 2 evenings' voices outside planning how to describe me. A phone timestamp aligning with a report to the non-emergency line about a hazard at my address that didn't occur. And a note about the chain of custody for these files. I didn't press play yet. That belonged to a later part of the outline, but I wanted it on the shoreline of the court's awareness, like weather building offshore. The judge leaned back. I am not predisposed to grant sweeping relief on thin affidavits, particularly where there appear to be factual disputes and readily available alternatives, he said. Petitioner. Why not a safety plan that respects autonomy? Olivia's tone softened in the way people soften when a door they wanted to bolt is politely closed by someone with keys. Your Honor, we just want her safe. We can explore alternatives. The word explore sometimes means retreat with dignity. The judge turned to me. Miss Whitfield, I'm continuing this for 2 weeks for a status conference on a voluntary plan. No orders restricting your rights today. If there's credible evidence of imminent risk, counsel can file properly and serve. In the meantime, I suggest the parties avoid creating issues they hope to litigate later. Translation: do not manufacture drama. Judges are fluent in euphemism. Understood, I said. Elder wisdom of the day: sometimes the win is not fireworks. It's the absence of a gavel where your life should be. As we wrapped, the judge added almost conversationally, "Thank you for the organization, Miss Whitfield. It assists the court." That sentence is the courthouse equivalent of a benediction. We filed out into the hallway weather, which felt less overcast now. Olivia bent toward Gabriel, whispering an addendum for a script that was losing its audience. He didn't answer. Patricia caught my eye and lifted her eyebrows, verdict rendered in punctuation. I sat on a bench for a minute, folder on my lap, listening to my pulse decelerate to a human setting. 3 small lines went into the notebook, so future me could find this feeling later. If rumor is a flood, exhibits are sandbags. If love wants a leash, offer a map instead. And me, I am not under guardianship. I am under oath to myself to be legible and calm. Outside, the sun was shameless about its brightness. I let it land on my face anyway. Paper rustled in my bag like leaves remembering how to be part of a tree. We walked to the car. Lunch was suddenly a reasonable thing. Back home, the house sighed like it had been holding its breath with me. I put the folder on the kitchen table, opened the windows an inch, and let ordinary air do its small miracle. Courts have weather. Kitchens have climate. Mine prefers calm with a breeze. I didn't pour victory tea. We hadn't won anything permanent, only daylight and 2 weeks. That's enough for a plan if you measure carefully. I pulled the legal pad toward me and wrote the 3 verbs again, larger this time: document, direct, de-escalate. They sound like traffic signals because that's what they are. Step 1 was the timeline. Not the skim version I'd sketched on the petition margins, but a map with streets and lampposts. I drew a grid, dates down the left hours across the top, truth in the boxes. It felt like quilting, which is also what you do when you want scraps to stop pretending they're random. I filled the squares with quiet facts, card receipts, smart plug logs, screenshots of autopay confirmations, the Zoom invite with its civic haiku streetlight number 19. Flickering the door camera's indifference to drama. When a box stayed blank, I asked it a polite question. What would you like to be filled with? A witness, a record. That's not magical thinking. That's project management with manners. Odd fact of the day: subpoena comes from the Latin sub poena, under penalty. It's the legal way of saying, bring the thing, or answer for why you didn't. I didn't need subpoenas yet, but I wrote the word in the margin because language with teeth helps you sit up straighter. Next, I called Dr. Rahman's office to thank them for the letter and to request something boring and powerful: appointment notes for my last 3 visits and a 1-page statement of no clinical concern for instrumental activities of daily living. The receptionist, a woman whose voice could unknot yarn, said, "Of course," and added, unprompted, "We'll notarize, so." No one needs to squint. The kindness of people who have their own folders is a religion with no wrong pews. Patricia arrived with sandwiches cut on the diagonal. She has standards and a small laminator she claims lowers her blood pressure. We spread the timeline on the table and gave ourselves the gift of highlighters. Yellow for finance, blue for home systems, green for third-party verification. It's like building a greenhouse, she said, clicking her pen. Truth grows better when it's warm and labeled. We added a tab for chain of custody, a phrase that sounds dramatic, until you realize it's just a travel diary for evidence. Where did this clip live? Who touched it? When did it move? I exported the front door audio to a thumb drive, printed the log that showed the export time, then wrote a stub note. Copied to drive, sealed in envelope. 3:10 p.m., signed N.W., witnessed by PR. We did the same for the stove data and camera video. Boring is a flex when the other side has been improvising. Academic phrase to tape above a kettle, base rate neglect, forgetting the most likely explanation, because a dramatic one feels tastier. Example, seeing a robe-clad woman carrying trash at 8:12 p.m. and diagnosing wandering instead of Tuesday. I didn't write that into any brief. I wrote it into my bones, so my tone would carry it without my mouth needing to. I drafted 3 short letters. The first to the Neighborhood Association. Thank you for the meeting on Streetlight Num 19. If anyone inquires about my whereabouts that evening, your Zoom attendance list may be helpful. No action requested, only clarity. The second to the utility. Please confirm in writing the autopay status on my account and the last 12 months of on-time payment. The third to the clinic named in the affidavit per your records custodian. I am not and have never been a patient. Kindly provide a brief letter on letterhead confirming this for court. I used phrases like kindly and brief because they invite compliance without inviting a novel. We took a breath, then rehearsed for the next hearing, the way you rehearse for a fire drill you hope never to need. Patricia read me a script Olivia might try. Nora is lucid in the mornings but declines in the evening. I answered with dates, not adjectives. Here are 3 emails I sent after 8 p.m. last week, clear, timely, and with fewer typos than the petition. Patricia offered, neighbors are worried, and I offered 2 named declarations using identical language suggest coaching. Here are texts between those neighbors on nights unrelated to me, time-stamped and mundane. We weren't playing gotcha. We were building a rhythm so my heart wouldn't volunteer to play the drum. Humor keeps the metronome from owning the song, so I wrote 3 more lines where my breath could find them. If laminating were therapy, I'd be emotionally bulletproof by noon. If highlighters were vitamins, I just met my daily allowance of yellow. If chain of custody had a mascot, it would be a sensible librarian with comfortable shoes. By late afternoon, the binder had grown hips. Tabs, timeline, home systems, finance, health chain, alternatives. Notes. Under alternatives, I printed a 1-page plan titled Safety Without Seizure of Rights. Bullet points weekly check-in call with Dr. Raman's nurse for 8 weeks. Bank text alerts already active. Healthcare proxy naming. Patricia first, Ruth second. Voluntary power of attorney springing narrowly scoped to emergencies filed but dormant. A P.O. box for public mail, and a standing invitation for Gabriel to visit on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. to reintroduce ordinary. Guardianship might be a sledgehammer. I was offering a toolkit. Elder wisdom of the day. If you can hand a room a plan, you don't need to hand it your throat. The phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail and listened in the safety of rewind. A placid voice. This is Sergeant Hill from Fire EMS. Returning your public records inquiry. We can provide audio of the non-emergency calls for your address last month and CAD timestamps. There may be a small fee. Transparency always invoices. I was happy to pay. I called back, gave my email, and labeled a new tab Public Records because hope deserves a pocket. I also sent myself a kind email with the subject line regarding panic. Inside 3 sentences, future me could open at 1 a.m. If the rumor machine started creaking again. You have dates. You have allies. You have time. It sounds silly to email yourself courage, but I am an excellent clerk when the boss is shaking. The doorbell chimed. Not a petition this time, Flowers. No card. Olivia's style is many things. Anonymous isn't one. Likely a neighbor who thinks botany can smooth bureaucracy. I thanked the petals and set them where they could be beautiful without pretending to be relevant. At dusk, I printed a single sheet labeled Courtroom Tone and taped it inside the binder where my eye would land, even brief, specific. Underneath, 3 do nots. Do not argue motive. Do not diagnose anyone. Do not narrate pain as proof. Pain is real. It just doesn't scale well as evidence. Patricia packed the laminator like a beloved pet and hugged me with that practical pressure that tells your bones they haven't been mistaken for air. You're ready, she said. I'm readier, I answered. When you're aging politely, comparative adjectives are a love language. Before bed, I walked the perimeter like a lighthouse keeper locks stove windows, plants. The house hummed its steady C note of, okay. I set the binder on the entry table next to the bowl where Keys learned patience and wrote 3 last lines for the day. If rumor is ivy, paperwork is pruning shears. If safety means surrender, it isn't safety. It's theft in a soft sweater. And me, I am accumulating ounces of proof until they weigh more than adjectives. The night was kind enough to arrive without a speech. I let it. 2 weeks is just enough time for nerves to rehearse and for paper to learn its lines. The morning of the continued hearing, I ironed a blouse I reserved for dental cleanings, and sensible courage, poor tea, I'd have to abandon halfway and tuck the binder now with hips and opinions under my arm. Patricia met me on the steps with a peppermint and a look that said, "We brought a filing cabinet to a gossip fight." Courtroom weather. Again, tempered glass carpet, the color of compliance, the hum of HVAC and expectation. The clerk called our case, and you could feel Olivia's relief when the spotlight found her. She stood like a woman delivering a public service announcement. "Your Honor," she began, "we've brought the physician and witnesses to provide clarity. Clarity is a beautiful word. It earns its keep only when light survives contact with it." The judge, same veteran eyebrows, same patience, nodded. Petitioner may proceed. A man in a gray suit with a pleasant beard approached the witness box. He had that practiced medical neutrality voice calibrated to calm elevator. "State your name and qualifications," the judge said. "Dr. Leon Kellen, M.D., Geriatric Medicine," he replied, eyes soft as felt. "I consult for families navigating cognitive decline." I noted the preposition for families, not for patients. It's a fine distinction, unless you happen to be the patient. Olivia gave him the kind of smile people give to thermostats. "Doctor, you evaluated my mother-in-law?" He cleared his throat, small, rehearsed. "I reviewed her case," he said. "I spoke with family neighbors and reviewed an incident report. Based on the available information, I concluded she is at risk when alone." "Did you examine her?" the judge asked before Olivia could lead the dance. "Not directly," he said, quick. "Scheduling constraints." Odd fact of the day, the word testify shares a root with testament, both about bearing witness. In Latin, testis referred to a third person present to watch an agreement, someone whose job was to notice. Today we pretend paper can notice on its own. It can't. It needs a human with a pulse and an appointment. Olivia slid into the opening. "Doctor, in your professional opinion, would temporary guardianship reduce risk?" "In cases like this," he said, "guardianship can provide structure and safety." Doctors have a beautiful way of speaking in generalities while implying specifics. It's a kindness in exam rooms and a trick in court. I wrote 2 words in my notebook: scope creep. Olivia called neighbor 1 a woman I knew only as a small dog and an enthusiastic seasonal wreath. She clutched her purse like a flotation device. I've noticed confusion, she said, eyes darting to the ceiling like the truth lived near the sprinkler heads. She sometimes forgets. How often, the judge asked. Glanced toward Olivia, who performed neutrality so neutrally it looped back to choreography. Several times, neighbor 1 said. For example, she was out late in her robe. Trash night, I murmured, not to be clever, but to keep my breathing in the room with me. Neighbor 2 followed a man with an enviable lawn and an allergy to context. Lights on late several miscues with mail. The phrasing matched neighbor 1's almost exactly, as though both had studied for the same test. People do that information cascades turn into synchronized swimming. If you whisper a script often enough, it wears grooves in recall. Then Olivia produced a printout labeled Incident Narrative. We have a report, she said, of a fire hazard at Miss Whitfield's home stove left on. Smoke noted by a passerby. The judge tilted his head. From the fire department. From a community responder, Olivia said smoothly. Documented as a neighbor call. I felt my pulse lean forward, the way a runner leans at the line. Patricia's eyebrow, my favorite early warning system, arched. We had requested records, we had dates, we had the kind of paper that likes crosswalks. The judge asked the obvious question. Was there a response? Noted as resolved, Olivia said, folding the page like origami obedience. Academic phrase for the room, motivated reasoning the mind's gymnastic sport, where conclusions pick their evidence, not the other way around. I didn't say it aloud. It hummed in the background like the HVAC. The judge turned to me. Miss Whitfield, you'll have a chance to respond. Understood, I said, and placed my palm on the binder's cover the way a person touches a sleeping cat, familiar, grateful, careful not to wake the drama. Olivia closed with a summary that did what summaries do when they've been out jogging with adjectives. In short, Your Honor, we're not trying to control. We're trying to care. If care comes with a leash, check the collar for a name tag that isn't yours. Elder wisdom of the morning. The judge glanced at me. Respondent. With the court's leave, I said, I'll keep my outline. First, answer the doctor. Second, examine the neighbors. Third, address the incident report. And then I'll offer less restrictive alternatives again in case anyone here has fallen in love with hammers. A tremor of a smile at the bench. Humor in teaspoons oxygenates a room. I started with Dr. Kellen because professional courtesy prefers the front of the line. Doctor. I said, voice steady, you are not my treating physician. No. You did not examine me. No. You formed an opinion based on selected secondhand reports and a document not authored by the fire department. He paused, recalibrating, based on available information. Available to whom, I asked gently. To you, not to me. I lifted a page. Here is Exhibit E, my treating physician's letter with dates and observations. And here I set down a second sheet, our appointment notes. Did you request those? I did not. Did you request logs from my home systems? I did not. Did you request records from the utility or the bank? No. And yet you concluded guardianship can provide safety. In cases like this, he repeated, and my bones smiled. Scripts don't like being called by their stage names. The judge raised a hand. Doctor, are you comfortable testifying to this respondent's capacity without an exam? Dr. Kellen looked down as if the answer might be trapped under his tie. I would prefer an exam, he said finally. Duly noted, the judge replied. Ink met paper, forecast changing. I turned to the neighbors with the tone I use when showing children how to untangle a kite. Miss Turner. I said to the wreath wearer, your declaration says I was out wandering after dark on the 12th. Would you like to see a time-stamped video of me taking trash to the curb at 8:12 p.m.? You can decide whether that's wandering or Tuesday. She blinked. I might have misinterpreted. Reasonable, I said. We forgive trash for being dramatic. Mr. Dale. I said to the lawn idealist, your declaration mentions miscues with mail. Could you name one? He coughed. A package sat on your porch. For how long? An hour. In my notebook, I wrote, Pilgrim Meet Mountain. Then I closed it so the sentence would not escape and cause mischief. Finally, the incident narrative. I held up the page Olivia had offered. The court asked if this is from the fire department. It is not. I lifted a different document. Exhibit H is a response from Fire EMS with CAD timestamps and audio of the non-emergency call. The judge accepted it. The clerk pressed play. A voice filled the room, nervous, performative. There's smoke at address. I think the old lady left something on. The dispatcher's voice practiced triage. Do you see flames? No, but... Any alarm sounding? No, but it smells like toast. I let the clip run to the end, then handed up the CAD sheet with the notation no units dispatched. Call closed as unfounded. Additionally, I said one more stone in the path. Exhibit Y is my smart plug log for that night. 0 draw. Exhibit J is the door camera, no visitors. Exhibit K is the utilities auto-pay confirmation. And Exhibit L is my calendar entry for the neighborhood Zoom we all enjoyed while Streetlight No. 19 did its disco. I let the room remember. Laughter thin but honest touched the back row. Humor because lungs. If smells like toast were probable cause, brunch would be a crime spree. If synchronized affidavits were an Olympic sport, we'd still be docking points for creativity. If generalities had copays, this doctor's bill would be fascinating. I didn't push further. The room already understood the shape of the thing impression management dressed as care, motivated reasoning auditioning as medicine, neighbors cast as chorus. My job wasn't to punish. It was to make oxygen. Your Honor, I said softer. I renew my offer of less restrictive alternatives and add one, a court notice safety plan filed by stipulation weekly check-ins, alerts, proxies. If petitioner's goal is safety, this meets it. If the goal is control, it will not satisfy. The judge looked at Olivia. Petitioner. She swallowed. Scripps had abandoned her for the afternoon. We can review a plan, she said. Elder wisdom of the day. Some victories don't feel like trumpets. They feel like altitude, returning to a room. The judge exhaled the way judges do when the day has decided not to break. We'll take a short recess, he said, and reconvene to address next steps. He looked at me, then at the recorder. I may have some questions about that audio's chain of custody. Gladly, I said, hand on the binder, the way you might rest your palm against a steady door frame. The house would testify next. It had kept its memory clean, so had I. I sat down, let the peppermint melt without biting through it, and wrote 3 lines for the version of me that wakes at 2 a.m., asking if she did enough. If rumor is theater today, the curtain lifted and found a workshop. If care is control, in costume paperwork is a good pair of glasses. And me, I am not a case study in decline. I am a person with dates. Recess ended with the soft thud of the courtroom door and the judge's glasses migrating back to the bridge of his nose like birds returning to a familiar branch. I stood when he entered. Calm is a kind of choreography that steadies your bones. Miss Whitfield, he said you mentioned you'd proceed with questions. With the court's permission, I answered, I'll begin briefly with the physician, then the neighbors, and reserve the home system materials for later. The house would have its say next. For now, I would keep to people who had already been speaking loudly. Dr. Kellen returned to the stand posture arranged into medical neutrality. I kept my tone kitchen warm. Doctor, you consult for families, not courts, fair. Frequently, yes. And you're compensated by the family requesting the consult. That's standard. So in this case, the petitioner, my daughter-in-law, paid for your time. He hesitated. Yes. Odd fact of the day, I offered for the record, and the room's lungs in research on conflicts of interest. Even small gifts like a pen can nudge conclusions. Brains are generous about reciprocity. I let the fact sit a friendly paperweight. Doctor, you did not examine me correct. Correct. You did not request my treating physician's notes, did not review home system logs, and did not verify the incident narrative with fire EMS. No. Yet you concluded I was at risk when alone, based on secondhand reports, based on available information, available to you, I said gently. Not to the court, not to me. Would you be comfortable revising your conclusion to reflect that you have insufficient data to opine on my capacity without an exam? He looked at the judge, then down at his hands. I would prefer an exam before offering a definitive opinion. Thank you. I turned from him without victory in my shoes. Elder wisdom of the day, you don't need a scalp when a scalp is just a hat. You need clarity. Neighbor Juan Reeds and Small Dog took the stand again. Miss Turner, I said your declaration used the phrase wandering after dark. You meant the night of the 12th. Yes. Would it refresh your recollection to see a time-stamped image of me taking trash out at 8:12 p.m. in slippers that were not thrilled about it? A half smile surprised her mouth. It would. I held up the still no drama, just Tuesday, doing its job. Does that look like wandering? It looks like trash, she said softly. Reasonable people have been misled by worse. I pivoted. You and Mr. Dale used nearly identical phrasing in your declarations, miscues with mail, out late in robe, confused about bills. Did you draft these together? She faltered, eyes flicking toward Olivia. I was guided on wording. Guided by whom? Olivia sent examples, she said, a little relief escaping. Scripts are heavy. People are glad to put them down. Neighbor 2, Mr. Dale of the immaculate edging, followed the same polite path. Yes, he admitted we were given language. Thank you, I said, turning a page. Academic phrase for the room. Illusory truth effect. Repeat a claim often enough, and the brain starts to rate it as true. Identical phrasing is an accelerant. That's why we ask for original observation, not synchronized poetry. The court reporter kept her face neutral. Her fingers enjoyed themselves. Now, Olivia. I kept my voice level as a countertop. Petitioner, did you contact Dr. Kellen directly or through a community resource? Through the resource. Who paid the invoice? We did. Did you provide him with my treating physician's name? I did not have it. Did you ask me for it? Her smile tried to become policy. You were difficult to reach. Petitioner, we spoke the same week you filed. I held up my call log. We discussed the centerpiece colors for Sophie's recital. If you had asked for my doctor's name, I would have provided it. She blinked. Scripts don't like surprise props. Let's talk about the incident narrative. Did you or someone at your direction place the non-emergency call about smelling toast at my address? She bristled. I asked a neighbor to drive by. We were worried. Worried enough to call in smoke that wasn't there. It smelled like something, she said, shrinking the claim like a sweater in hot water. Are you aware the dispatcher's CAD shows no units dispatched, call closed, unfounded? I lifted the printout, friendly as a tea towel. I am now. And are you aware the smart plug log shows 0 draw on the stove that night? She exhaled. If everything is fine, why not accept guardianship to keep it that way? Because cages and safety are not synonyms. I let my face say only, next question. Last I said, did you text the neighbor's sample statements? I provided context, she said. Would you read your text dated the 13th aloud? I slid a page to the clerk. The judge nodded. The text on record used something like miscues with mail and out late in robe. Keep it objective. The room inhaled the way a room does when the weather changes. I felt the urge to add a clever line. I let it pass. Jokes help oxygen, but oxygen was doing fine. Instead, I returned to the outline. Your Honor, we have a medical consultant who admits he didn't examine me neighbors who were coached on phrasing and an incident closed as unfounded. The remaining question is, chain of custody for my home system files. I'm prepared to walk through acquisition, storage, export logs, and authentication calmly and briefly so the court can decide whether to rely on them at all.
He nodded. We'll get there next. A glance toward the clock. Bring me the spine of it now.
Yes, Your Honor. I opened the tab. Front door unit is a commercial model that stores encrypted clips locally and syncs to cloud at 300 a.m. daily. Each clip has a SHA-256 hash, think of it as a fingerprint. I exported the relevant files 2 days after the events generated checksums before and after export and burned them to a write-once disk in the presence of a witness. I touched Patricia's shoulder in my mind. We logged date, time, device, ID file names, and hashes, sealed the disk, and stored it in a home safe until today. I brought both the original disk and a working copy. I can testify to every hand that touched it, mine, and the notary who verified the log. Same process for the smart plug CSV. The judge made another note. Ink again functioning as weather. All right. 2 more points before we rest this part, I said. First, less restrictive alternatives are not a rhetorical flourish. They're a map. I've prepared a stipulated safety plan, weekly, nurse check-ins, text alerts for financial activity, a healthcare proxy on file, a standing Tuesday dinner with my son, and a narrow springing POA filed with the clerk dormant unless 2 physicians certify incapacity. Second, if the court remains concerned, I'll agree to a neuropsych exam scheduled by the court with my participation not as a rumor-driven ambush. The judge looked at me over his reader's measuring. If I heard correctly, he said, petitioner's current evidence is thin and respondent offers a detailed alternative. I will hear the home system authentication and then decide whether we need any exam at all. I nodded. The House would speak in Part 6. For now, I offered the room air. My 3 jokes for the lungs kept small and accurate. If context were a seasoning, we've seen what happens when you dump the whole jar. If identical phrasing came with royalties, those texts could fund a vacation. If brunch smells were a probable cause, every cafe in town would need counsel. I could feel the temperature drop, less fever, more weather. The judge turned to the clerk. Mark the exhibits accordingly. We'll reconvene in 10 to address chain of custody and admissibility. People stood, sat, stood again, the choreography of a room, remembering it has knees. I wrote 3 lines for future me, the one who wakes at 2:17 a.m. and asks for proof of her own backbone. If rumor is a mask, cross-examination is a clean mirror. If care arrives with scripts for bystanders, ask who's directing the scene. And me, I am not here to punish. I'm here to ventilate the truth. The bailiff opened the door. The hallway air felt less overcast, still court, but with windows. Next up, the House would testify. It had better manners than rumor and a longer memory. The House and I had made an agreement years ago I would keep it upright and oiled. It would remember what I forget and what others pretend. Ms. Whitfield, the judge, said, "Walk me through the authentication." His voice was even curiosity with a law degree. Yes, Your Honor. I opened the tab, labeled chain. Front door unit, Model X records, encrypted MP4 to local storage syncs to cloud nightly at 3:10 a.m. Each clip has a SHA-256 hash. I exported the relevant clips 2 days after the events. Here, I held up a printout are the hashes pre- and post-export with matching checksums. I burned them to a write-once disk, sealed it, and logged the seal number. A working copy is on a thumb drive for the court. The clerk took both like they were shy birds. The judge nodded. Foundation appears adequate. Play Exhibit H1. The courtroom feels differently when sound comes from speakers instead of mouths. The clip opened with a door hinge, night air, the polite scrunch of gravel. Then Olivia's voice, brisk, hushed, choreographing, just keep it objective. Miscues with mail. Out late in robe. Don't say confused, say concerned, and we'll call it in as non-emergency. Paper trail without sirens. A second voice, the neighbor with the wreaths, answered nervous. Are you sure? Olivia softer. Trust me. It looks better if it's not from family. Patricia's eyebrows tried to climb out of her forehead. Even the court reporter forgot to pretend her fingers weren't listening. Olivia's jaw performed a small protest under her skin. Timestamp, the judge asked. 1941, I said. 2 minutes before the non-emergency call, I slid forward the computer-aided dispatch log from Fire EMS 1943. Caller reports, smells like toast at address. 1944. No alarm, no flame, caller not on scene. 1946. Closed unfounded. The judge read pen making the small friendly noises of ink, telling paper a story it will keep. Admission of a party opponent is not hearsay, he said, almost to himself, the way gardeners mutter Latin at roses. Exhibit H1 admitted. Olivia's attorney, she still didn't have one. That was a choice, half rose. Your Honor, this recording was authenticated and supplied with chain of custody documentation, the judge said, not unkindly. You'll have opportunity to argue wait. Translation, this isn't going back in the box. Odd fact of the day, the first 911 call in the United States was made in 1968 in Haleyville, Alabama, to a desk phone with a handwritten label. We've improved the switchboards. The human tendency to call in drama before facts caught up is older than telephones. Exhibit H2, I said, is the clip from the next night. The screen showed my porch light doing its best impression of a lighthouse. Voices again lower, conspiratorial. Olivia. Remember, don't add color, just line items. If he asks, say, we're just worried. Neighbor 2, dutiful worried. The word landed like a stamp on an envelope. The judge turned to me. Miss Whitfield, how did you identify the voices? Lay opinion, Your Honor, I said. I've heard my daughter-in-law speak for 16 years. Dinner tables, holidays, dentist waiting rooms. The neighbors have lived next door for 8. I could identify them in a blackout by the way they say hello. He glanced at the reporter. Sufficient. Then to me, continue. I didn't rush the stove data. Numbers have more dignity when they arrive on time. Exhibit J, smart plug, CSV. It's boring, which is why it's trustworthy. 0 draw overnight on the alleged burner days. Then a small spike at 6:10 a.m. when my kettle makes its morning announcement. The judge's mouth did that tiny, not quite smile judges allow themselves when unexcited facts do exciting work. In the utility, Exhibit K, auto pay confirmations. Machines don't flatter, they stamp. He looked to Olivia, petitioner. She tried to gather the air into compliance. These recordings, context matters. We were brainstorming how to help by coaching witnesses to use identical phrasing and creating a non-emergency paper trail. The judge's eyebrows held a graduate seminar, academic phrase of the day, because this has been a series expectancy effect. When you expect decline, you notice what fits and miss what contradicts it. You also prime others to see what you see. I didn't say the phrase aloud. I let the clip wear it. Let's address chain of custody, the judge said, back to neutral, briefly. Yes, Your Honor. I pointed to the log in the tap dates, times, device IDs, file names, hashes, witnesses. Front door units syncs nightly. I exported at 14:03 2 days later, generated checksums with SHA 256, burned to DVD-R, sealed initial placed in home safe, working copy to counsel's table. I gestured to the bailiff who had watched me break the seal. We also have a notary acknowledgement for the log. The smart plug data followed the same path. He tapped his pen. Authentication adequate. He looked toward the clerk. Mark H1 and H2 as admitted. J and K admitted as business records foundation for now. Judges say for now the way weather says partly. It's still a forecast. From the second row, Gabriel inhaled like a man who had been underwater and had just remembered the verb breathe. He folded his hands and let his eyes be honest for once. Humor applied in teaspoons because lungs, if smells like toast were probable cause, every brunch spot in town would need counsel. If identical phrasing paid royalties, those text messages could fund a weekend at the lake. If boredom were a witness, my CSV would be sworn in with honors. Anything further on the recordings, the judge asked. One short clip, Exhibit H3, I said. It shows me on the phone at 8:31 p.m. on the wandering night, Zoom audio leaking from my laptop, the phrase, "Streetlight 19 is flickering," clearly audible. It's proof of life and of municipal frustration. The room smiled without permission. He admitted it. The judge set his pen down like punctuation. Petitioner, the evidentiary posture has shifted. You could feel the barometer drop. I am directing the clerk to obtain today official audio from fire, EMS, of the relevant calls, and I'm issuing an order preserving the phones of petitioner and the two neighbors pending a limited download by a neutral examiner for the time period at issue. Olivia's face moved through 3 weather systems, Your Honor. This is a narrow, time-boxed preservation order, he said. You want safety. This is what safety looks like under oath. Nobody's leaping to conclusions. We are measuring. Elder wisdom of the day. You do not need to set anyone on fire when the thermostat is finally working. He turned back to me. Anything else for present purposes, Miss Whitfield? Yes, I said, and laid a single page on the rail, safety, without seizure, of Wright's stipulated plan. Weekly nurse check-in calls for 8 weeks, existing text alerts for financial activity, healthcare proxy on file, narrow springing power of attorney held in escrow dormant unless 2 physicians certify incapacity. My consent to a court-ordered neuropsych exam if after verification the court still has questions. The judge read it the way you read a recipe from someone who has cooked this before. Petitioner. Olivia's voice was low. We can review that. Good, he said. Because what I will not do is enter a guardianship based on coach declarations and a consultant who did not examine the respondent. He looked over his glasses, which is where disappointment lives. This court prefers oxygen to theater. We'll reconvene after the clerk receives fire EMS materials. He rose. The bailiff called the ritual words that let air back into bodies. People stood, sat, stood again. The hallway remembered it was just a hallway. Patricia touched my sleeve. Your house testified, she whispered. It passed the bar. We found a bench and sat with our spines behaving. I wrote 3 lines for the version of me who wakes at 2:20 a.m. asking if she hallucinated the daylight. If rumor is static, authenticated audio is the song. If concern asks for custody, ask it for its sources. And me, I am not the emergency. I am the record. The clerk appeared at the doorway with a stack of discs in a clear evidence envelope. Fire, EMS, had moved fast, weather changing by the hour. Back on the record in 15, the bailiff called. I closed my eyes and let the building breathe through me. Kitchens have climate, courthouses have weather, but either way you can open a window. The next part would be verification, and the part after that would be consequences. But for the first time since the knock before breakfast, I felt the room agree with my name. 15 minutes later, we were back on the record, the evidence envelope from fire, EMS, sitting on the clerk's table like a snow globe that once shaken would not return to its former weather. The judge adjusted his glasses. The courtroom adjusted its breath. Clerk, he said, let's hear the official audio. The speakers clicked. A dispatcher's voice came first, calm in the way of people who do triage for a living. Then the caller, there's smoke at address. Smells like toast. The old lady must have left something on. Do you see flames? The dispatcher asked.
No. Is any alarm sounding? No.
Are you at the location? A beat, not exactly. The dispatcher followed the script designed by people who understand the difference between emergency and imagination. No alarm, no flames, caller not on scene. A few more clarifying questions, then the closeout code, unfounded. The SIAD printout on the judge's bench matched the way a heartbeat on a monitor matches the pulse in your wrist when the room is quiet enough to listen. Odd fact of the day, 911 and non-emergency dispatches use disposition codes not for drama, but for data for unfounded in many systems. Those tiny letters become policy later, a reminder that bureaucracy can be a time machine when you let it. The judge nodded to the clerk, admitted. Then to Olivia Petitioner, do you know who placed this call? Olivia's mouth tried 3 sentences before it found one it could wear. We asked a neighbor to drive by, she said softly. We were worried. Worried, the judge repeated a word, now heavy with recorded context, yet not present. He turned to me, Miss Whitfield, anything to add before I questioned the witnesses? Only this, I said. I don't fault anyone for caring. I fault the route care took. He gestured to neighbor 1. Miss Turner, please return to the stand. She did purse clutched so tightly the fabric developed a memory. Yes, Your Honor. Did you place the call? She shook her head, tiny, guilty. No, I'm relayed what I'd been told. And what were you told? That there was smoke. By whom? Her eyes went toward Olivia, the way a plant leans toward a window. Olivia, she whispered. The judge's pen made a neat note. Ink as weather again. Mr. Dale, he called. Did you place the call? No, Your Honor. Mr. Dale cleared his throat with the offended dignity of a man whose lawn has never once misbehaved. I thought there was concern. I did as asked. Who asked? He paused just long enough to negotiate with his pride. Olivia. I didn't gloat. My job wasn't victory. It was ventilation. The judge turned to Dr. Kellen. Doctor, having now heard the dispatch audio and the respondent's home system logs, do you maintain your previously stated opinion? Dr. Kellen, to his credit, chose honesty over style. No, Your Honor. Without an exam and with this clarification, I cannot offer an opinion on capacity. I can say families often mistake vigilance for evidence. Academic phrase for those following along at home. Bayesian updating, you start with a prior belief, weigh new evidence, and adjust your belief accordingly. The problem arrives when your prior is decline and your evidence smells like toast. The posterior should be humility. The judge steepled his fingers, a cathedral of patience. Petitioner, do you wish to proceed with your request for temporary guardianship today? Olivia's voice had lost its ring-light confidence. We only wanted safety. Safety, he said, doesn't arrive by coaching witnesses, manufacturing paper trails, or hiring consultants who don't examine the person they're opining about. He looked down at the fire EMS envelope, then back at her. This court is not an accessory to impression management. Patricia's eyebrow did a small cartwheel in my peripheral vision. I kept my eyes on the judge and my hands folded like a student who had finally brought the right book. He turned to me. Miss Whitfield, you offered a stipulated safety plan. Is that still available? It is, I said, sliding the single page forward again. It's boring on purpose. Boring is the court's love language, he replied, almost smiling. He read quickly. Weekly nurse check-ins, text alerts, healthcare proxy springing, POA in escrow Tuesday dinners. He tapped the page. This satisfies my concern for now. He faced Olivia. Do you stipulate? She hesitated. Scripts don't like being replaced by lists. Gabriel leaned forward, voice steady for the first time in months. We stipulate, he said. It was a sentence that repotted itself on the way out of his mouth. Very well, the judge said. The petition for temporary guardianship is denied today. We will convert the status conference to a review of the safety plan in 60 days. He paused, let the room feel its new air, then picked up another sheet.
Before we adjourn, a warning. The court has now heard evidence suggesting witness coaching and an attempt to create a false impression of emergency. Phones are preserved. A neutral examiner will download relevant communications. Depending on what is found, sanctions may be appropriate. He did not look at Olivia when he said sanctions. He looked at the idea of everyone who thinks courts are props. Humor, 3 teaspoons for the lungs.
If brunch smells were probable cause, we'd need ankle monitors at every cafe. If worry had a speed limit, some folks would be docking points on their license. If dignity were an appliance today, the thermostat finally stopped clicking.
He wasn't finished. Miss Whitfield, he said softer, thank you for the organization and tone. It assists the court when parties present facts without pyrotechnics.
Elder wisdom of the day. Pyrotechnics feel like power. Paperwork is power. You just have to make peace with the fact that power sometimes wears a cardigan. The judge directed the clerk to issue the preservation order immediately and to schedule the neutral download. We'll reconvene on those results if needed, he said. Until then, the safety plan governs. He raised his gavel only halfway enough to end the moment without bruising it.
We filed into the hallway weather. Olivia stood very still as if movement might smudge what had just been written into the air. Mr. Dale found something urgent on his shoes. Miss Turner petted her purse like a tiny dog. Gabriel approached me, then stopped at a respectful distance as if testing the new weight of the word boundaries in public.
I'll see you Tuesday, he said.
It was both apology and RSVP.
I'll make a roast chicken that minds its own business, I answered. Patricia and I found a bench. My binder sat between us, warm from my hands, heavier from the kind of paper that prefers quiet rooms. I wrote 3 lines in the notebook because 2 a.m. Nora is always grateful when noon. Nora leaves breadcrumbs. If rumor is fog, official audio is a lighthouse. If care arrives with choreography, ask for the rehearsal notes. And me, I am not fragile. I am precise. The clerk appeared with a copy of the signed order preservation safety plan on file review date set. Paper as oxygen. Paper as forward motion. We thanked her with the particular sincerity reserved for people who make the day less dramatic. On the steps outside, a breeze moved through the trees like the courthouse had finally remembered it was part of a city where people take out their trash in robes and boil water at 6:10 a.m. A reporter loitered across the plaza, nose tuned to scandal. We kept walking. There is nothing to say to spectacle that a well-timed errand cannot say better. Back home, the house exhaled. I placed the signed order under clarity and added a new tab, review 60 days, not victory maintenance. I put on water for tea and let the kettle practice its small aria. Odd quiet coda. I pulled a single sticky note and wrote, Bayesian update achieved prior decline replaced by posterior process. Then I stuck it to the inside of the cabinet where I keep the mugs, because even an old woman deserves to open a door in the morning and be reminded that the world can occasionally learn. I didn't text anyone a roundup. I didn't post a thing. I sliced a lemon, poured the tea, and watched the light choose its favorite square of the floor. I had promised the court boring. The day mercifully complied. 60 days passed, the way paint dries when you stop staring at it. Tuesday dinners with Gabriel nurse check-ins that sounded like weather reports, any dizziness, any falls, any good soup bank alerts, pinging politely and then minding their business. The review hearing arrived on a day the courthouse smelled faintly of floor cleaner and rain. I wore the blouse that forgives posture and tucked my calm into the binder like a pressed leaf. The clerk had new exhibits, downloads from the neutral examiner who had briefly babysat 3 phones and a cloud account or 2. They sat in a neat stack on the rail, each page numbered like patients. The judge took his seat. The room took its breath. We are here on respondent's safety plan review and on the preservation order, he said. Clerk summarized the extraction. The clerk, a woman with the diction of a measured metronome, read text threads between petitioner and the two neighbors. A note labeled "Talking Points Created the Morning of the First Hearing." A call log aligning to the smells like toast report. And from a week earlier, a draft email to a community resource attaching a bullet list, miscues with mail out, late in robe, worried. The timestamps lined up like marching band hats. Odd fact of the day, prejudice in with prejudice descends from Latin praejudicium, a prior judgment. In court, it means the door is closed because we've already weighed the matter. You can't knock again with the same story and a fresh ribbon. The judge flipped a page. Petitioner, I'm looking at a text that reads, use something like miscues with mail, keep it objective. Another. We'll call it a non-emergency, so there's a paper trail without sirens. Would you like to address these? Olivia stood. Her voice had been through a few weather systems since we met at part 2. We were concerned, she said the word now less halo, more habit. We thought structure would keep her safe. Structure built from coached statements and a manufactured incident, the judge said. His tone wasn't angry, it was architectural. This court protects autonomy. It does not conscript rumor. He called Miss Turner and Mr. Dale. They didn't dance. Yes, we were sent phrases. Yes, we agreed to make a call. Yes, we thought we were helping. The record doesn't require malice, it requires clarity. We had it. Then he turned to Dr. Kellen. Doctor, any revision? The man earned back a sliver of dignity with a simple sentence. Without an exam, and in light of this, I retract my prior impression. Academic phrase, to please the one librarian in the back row and my own spine, epistemic hygiene, keeping your knowledge clean by checking sources, controlling for bias, and refusing to launder hunches into facts. Courts run on it. Families should try. The judge set his pen down like a period. All right, he looked at me. Ms. Whitfield, your safety plan appears to be working. He looked at Olivia. Petitioner, your method appears to have been performative concern coupled with evidence staging. He looked at the neighbors. You are now witnesses to your own lesson. Here is the ruling, he said, adjusting his glasses to the precise latitude of certainty. The petition for temporary guardianship is denied with prejudice. There will be no do-over on this record. Further, the court issues a 1-year protective order prohibiting petitioner from contacting respondents' medical providers, financial institutions, or service vendors, except through respondents' designated counsel. Any attempts to solicit statements about respondents' capacity from third parties shall be deemed contact under this order. Ink met paper. Weather became law. He wasn't finished. Sanctions. The word arrived without drama and with the weight of furniture. The court awards respondent reasonable fees and costs associated with authentication and public records requests. The matter of false reporting and witness coaching is referred to the city attorney for evaluation. He looked up not unkindly. This is not vengeance. This is consequences. A sound half in breath, half chair shift moved the room. Patricia's eyebrow executed a quiet cartwheel. Gabriel put a hand over his mouth the way people do when a truth finally finds its volume. Olivia stared at a midpoint in the wood grain that could not save her. Mr. Dale looked like a man who had mistaken his hedge trimmer for a legal strategy. Miss Turner petted her purse again, small dog or conscience, I couldn't tell. The judge turned back to me. Miss Whitfield, anything further? Only gratitude, I said. For process, for oxygen, for a record that remembers. Elder wisdom of the day, you don't celebrate a working brake pedal. You simply drive home safer. He nodded. The safety plan remains in place by stipulation. We're adjourned. The gavel touched down like a goodnight kiss. Hallway weather again. A reporter hovered antennae tuned to scandal. We gave her the only quote that starves spectacle, no comment. The order speaks. Paper is fluent in press conferences. Near the elevators, Olivia approached with a look I recognized from holidays when the gravy separated a pot about to boil and nowhere dignified to put the steam. "Nora," she said, "you made me look." "I didn't make you look," I said, voice as soft as felt. The record did. I shifted my binder to the other arm. "I wish you peace that doesn't require a leash." She blinked. Scripts don't include benedictions. Outside, the rain had turned cooperative. We walked to the car without hoods. My binder felt lighter, though the paper count hadn't changed. That's what prior judgment does when it lands correctly. It takes weight out of your joints and puts it back into the world where it belongs. Back home, the house exhaled. I filed the signed order under clarity and added a small card with the day's vocabulary because future me appreciates a neat glossary with prejudice, door closed. Epistemic hygiene, clean knowledge, sanctions, consequences, not revenge. Then I did the ordinary administrative rituals that keep panic from trying to unionize, emailed Dr. Raman and Ms. Patel copies of the protective order, set a calendar reminder for its renewal window, and texted the nurse, "Thank you for the Tuesday patience." 3 jokes to let the lungs stretch after all that tile and Latin. If worry had a speed limit today, somebody got a ticket and a pamphlet. If brunch smells were probable cause, the city would need a warrant for every toaster. If dignity were an appliance, we finally found the on switch and labeled it. I brewed tea, wrote a short note to the librarian who likes my metaphors, and stood at the sink, watching rain trace the glass like the window had joined cursive club. My phone buzzed. Gabriel. "Thank you for letting the paper talk. See you Tuesday. I'll bring carrots." I typed back, "I'll bring a chicken that minds its own business." Before bed, I opened the notebook to the page where I keep sentences for nights when sleep forgets my address. I added 3 lines in a handwriting steadier than in part 1. If rumor is performance art, a dismissal with prejudice, is the museum closing for the evening? If care arrives as choreography, ask for the rehearsal logs, then ask it to sit down. And me, I am not restored by punishment. I am restored by process that remembers my name. The kettle clicked. The house settled into its evening thesis that peace is not a miracle, but a maintenance plan with good labels. I turned off the lamp and let the room be quiet on purpose. Tomorrow would be locks, codes, and quiet systems, the kind of boring I now collect like seashells. The morning after the order felt like a house finally remembering its own hinges. Rain stitched a fine pattern on the window. The kettle rehearsed its small aria. We had a ruling, yes. But rulings are umbrellas useful, not weatherproof. Today's work was locks, codes, and quiet systems, the kind of unglamorous choreography that keeps drama from thinking it has an invitation. Elder wisdom of the day. If a problem touches your money or your medical chart, don't make speeches, make policy. If it touches your heart, make soup. I had tea and policy on the stove. First stop, Seaboard Savings, where Miss Patel keeps a chair facing the window like she understands moods. We refreshed the code word, I won't print it here. Even grandmothers are allowed secrets, and stapled a copy of the protective order to my profile. "New note on your account," she said, typing with that gentle authority bankers use when they're protecting your future self. No changes without Nora present, with ID and code word. Staff to call Nora first. Do not accept family representative requests. She added a 2-step callback protocol. If anyone inquires, the teller must call me at 2 numbers on file and hear me say a phrase we chose that would never appear on social media. Odd fact of the day, the pin tumbler lock we still use in our front doors is an update of an Egyptian design thousands of years old. People have been improvising privacy since we learned how to count. Next, the credit bureaus. I'd frozen my file earlier, but freezes are like houseplants. They prefer regular attention. I logged in, verified the freeze set a pin reset lock, and enrolled for fraud alerts that ping me before anyone opens a line in my name. Ms. Patel added 72-hour holds on any transfer above a certain number time for Prudence to walk in and sit down. Then I cleaned the password closet. I like tidy closets. I moved all critical logins into a password manager, rotated the ancient ones with too much nostalgia and not enough entropy, and added hardware keys for the accounts that would ruin my month if compromised. Humor helps when you're feeding passwords to the shredder, so if passwords burned calories, I'd be down 2 dress sizes before lunch. If forgot password were a personality test, I'd pass with a respectful C+. If two-factor had a sound mind, would be a little brass trumpet announcing, "Try again, dear." Academic phrase for the file principal agent problem, when the person acting on your behalf has incentives that don't line up with your welfare. Banks solve it with controls. Families should too. My solution: nobody acts on my behalf without paper that says so, and a clock that turns it off when I say. I walked to the post office and rented a P.O. box the size of a sturdy sandwich. At the counter, paint chipped just enough to be trustworthy, I handed over the order and a short letter. Please redirect any mail addressed to me that's marked urgent and appears to be about health or finance. If you're unsure, hold for pickup. Back home, I swapped addresses for vendors that don't need to know my porch. Soft boundaries, hard edges. At the kitchen table, I wrote to my medical providers. Page 1, Dr. Rahman, please place the protective order and my healthcare proxy on file. No third-party wellness checks without my consent. Any request from relatives for clarification should route to Attorney Lee, page 2. The clinic named in that imaginative affidavit per your records custodian. I am not a patient. Please note the protective order, decline family queries, direct all questions to counsel. I did not send a speech. I sent headers, bullets, and a phone number. Systems love phone numbers. I mirrored the process for service vendors, utilities, insurance, internet pharmacy. Each got a 1-page vendor notice. No changes by anyone but me in person with ID. Log any attempt and email a copy to counsel. You would be amazed how quickly phones stop ringing when their owners realize the call will create paperwork. The house earned its keep too. I changed the door code, extended the camera retention window from 30 to 60 days, and put a little card by the front door that reads, "Smile due process likes, good lighting. Private joke for a foyer." The smart plug dashboards got a weekly export reminder Saturday mornings right after the kettle has warmed the room. I added a UPS battery to the router because truth deserves electricity during storms. Patricia came over with a label maker, a small sermon in appliance form, and a bag of almonds. We printed fresh tabs for the binder, vendors, medical bureaus, access protocols, review 60 days, renewal calendar. She laminated the callback script for Miss Patel's team. Before any change, we will call Miss Whitfield at A and B. She will say the phrase, "The library opens at 9 to confirm. If not reached, no change." We laminated my pocket card too, ICE contacts medication list, primaries number, no guardianship, see advanced directive, and the line, "If found adorable but lost, please return with a scone." I'm collecting kindness where I can. I added a monthly admin ritual to the calendar titled Drawers and Doors. The checklist test, the backup export, the logs, peek at the credit file, glance at the bank rules, update the emergency envelope that lives in my safe, copies of IDs, the trust summary, the order, the proxy, and a letter to future me that says, "If you're reading this on a hard day, Drink, water, call, Patricia, and move one paper from one pile to another. Movement counts. We built a vendor packet with the protective order on top because people in headphones scanning screens deserve a straightforward day. The cover letter was 5 sentences long. I read every sentence out loud until it stopped pretending to be clever and consented to be clear. Clarity is a boundary that saves everyone's time. Around lunch, the nurse check-in call came right on schedule. Any dizziness? Any falls? Any good soup? She asked, smiling with the voice. No, and minestrone, I said. She laughed. You're my favorite boring chart. We should send nurses medals shaped like clipboards. I emailed Attorney Lee copies of the vendor notices and asked for 2 more small mercies. A template letter in legal tone for any new provider who meets a relative with an agenda, and a form affidavit for vendors to sign if they get strange calls affirming that they refused and routed per instructions. Law runs on data. I intend to feed it responsibly. By 2, the house felt like it had shrugged off a coat that didn't fit. I made tea, then dealt with something most people forget until a Tuesday goes sideways: digital legacy. I set a legacy contact on my accounts, wrote a plain English letter about where the important folders live, and taped a sealed envelope inside the safe that says, "Open only when the will opens." Not romantic, respectful. Humor again, because policy without laughter turns into a lecture. If 2-factor authentication were a pet mine, would be a well-trained terrier who barks at the right strangers. If credit freezes were spa treatments, my report just came back refreshed and uninterested. If label makers were therapy, Patricia and I are now emotionally alphabetized. Late afternoon, I walked the block. Leaves practiced their exits. The air negotiated with my sleeves. I thought about how process had become my new posture. Courts are built for it, but homes can be too. I am not interesting today, and that is the achievement. Back inside, I added one last tap to the binder grace. It's not for the court, it's for me. Inside, I put the letter Samuel and Gabriel have sent since all this began, the recipe card in Edward's handwriting that still smells faintly of nutmeg, and a note to myself that reads, "Do not let vigilance turn into a hobby." Systems are supposed to free you to live, not recruit you into a militia. At dusk, the porch light came on like a steady thought. I did my perimeter locks, stove windows, plants, and wrote 3 closing lines so 2 a.m. Nora can sleep on them. If safety is a house, locks are the doorknobs, policies are the studs. If love needs proof, cook. If power needs proof, print. And me, I am not braced for attack. I'm designed for quiet. The kettle clicked. The binder sat on the entry table, no longer a shield so much as a map. Tomorrow would be chicken with carrots and a Tuesday with my son. Lock set codes, memorize systems humming. I let the evening practice its own good manners. Gabriel knocked like a person who has rehearsed courtesy and is hoping the door understands. I opened it to find my son in his best. I fixed the thing before you noticed it was broken. Posture shirt, tucked hair, unsure eyes doing the math that children do even when the arithmetic of a parent is impossible. I stepped back and let the house breathe him in. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice careful as a plate with gravy on it. "Can I come in?" "You already did," I said, and because we both needed an easy laugh, we took it. I pointed him toward the kitchen. Tuesdays had become our truce, and truce prefers a table. I poured tea. He brought carrots, which he set on the counter with the relief of a man who believes produce can apologize on his behalf. We sat. He wrapped both hands around his mug like he was warming them at a small, honest fire. "I'm sorry," he started, and then stopped as if the sentence needed better shoes. "I'm sorry for being quiet when loud would have been better, and loud when quiet would have kept us whole." Elder wisdom of the day: when someone apologizes, ask for verbs, not adjectives. I'm sorry is a mist. I will is rain. He tried again. I will answer the phone when you call. I will not let anyone use your name to recruit me into a triangle. I will show up on Tuesdays, and if I can't, I'll say it with 24 hours notice and no elaborate story about traffic. He exhaled a long, rusty hinge, learning it still knows how. And I will not let concern be my excuse for disrespect. I nodded, because nodding is better than clapping in a kitchen. Good verbs, I said. Keep going. I don't want to talk about Mom here, he said, meaning Olivia, without needing syllables. I won't place you between us like furniture. If you want to know how I am, I will tell you how I am, not how she is. He looked up. That's differentiation, right? Academic phrase for the room: differentiation of self, staying connected without borrowing your feelings from the loudest person nearby. Therapists write essays about it. Tuesdays write soups. I'd like to put some boundaries in writing, I said, sliding a note card across the table as if I'd accidentally prepared it. Not as a contract, as choreography. He smiled even before reading. Paper has taught him to expect kindness, not ambush. The card was simple. We meet Tuesdays at 6. If either of us needs to move it, we offer 3 options, not an apology, casserole. We do not discuss third parties unless they're in the room or on the call. If a conversation warms past a simmer, we switch to tasks: wash dishes, peel carrots, fold dish towels. Hands detour heat. We keep Sophie and Noah out of adult strategy. They can ask questions. We answer with nouns, not legends. He read it, then read it again, like a man discovering the instructions were merciful. This helps, he said. Even the carrots. Especially the carrots, I said. Root vegetables are boundary experts. They stay where they're planted until someone moves them with a purpose. He laughed. I missed your voice in my head. The one that says complicated things like they're instructions for a coffee maker. Press on, add water, stop recruiting appliances for drama. He sobered. I need to tell you what I'm doing on my side. I started therapy, real therapy, not the kind where you show up to prove you're the good guy. I'm learning how to hear a request as a request and not as a test. Good, I said. I'm old enough to be allergic to tests I didn't sign up for. He nodded toward the binder on the counter, Clarity tab peeking like a tidy flag. You kept the paper gentle, he said. I didn't know that was a category. It is, I said. It's called I want oxygen, not applause. Odd fact of the day: the word threshold comes from the board that kept threshed straw from sliding out of the medieval doorway threshold. A house teaches language how to stay put. A family has to learn it sometimes the slow way. We move to the work of the evening, the part that looks like dinner but is actually engineering. He washed carrots. I salted the chicken like I mean it, which is my grandmother's only recipe note that survived in my handwriting. We talk logistics for Sophie and Noah. Friday afternoons here twice a month for reading and Lego. I'll do school concerts if asked, not as a protest march. Pictures are sent uncaptioned, and captions when necessary are generous. I don't want them to think you're a news item, he said. Nor a cautionary tale, I added. Grandmothers should be verbs: read, stir, drive, clap. He dried his hands and set the towel in its place with deliberate care. I need to confess the part I'm least proud of. He said the words sounding like they'd been held too long. I knew Mom was curating. I told myself I didn't have bandwidth to fight with her and plan a wedding. I thought neutrality was noble. Neutrality is a lovely hobby for clouds, I said. People need weather. He swallowed. Can you forgive me for waiting until a judge told me what I should have known at a kitchen table? Forgiveness is not a coupon. It doesn't expire, and it never goes on sale. but it does have sizes. I can forgive you for being afraid of your own weather, I said. I cannot forgive you for free. You'll pay in Tuesdays. I can afford Tuesdays, he said, the first strong sentence of the night. We ate early because some conversations prefer plates to metaphors. He told me about his weak roof shingles, misbehaving a manager who thinks slack is oxygen, how he's relearning what help means when it doesn't come with an invoice of influence. I told him about the library's adult literacy night, the woman who cried because she could finally fill out a form without folding herself into sorry. We traded recipes, his for a pasta that forgives, mine for a lemon loaf that does not. 3 small jokes to keep the lungs honest. If apologies were coupons, Tuesdays would be BOGO through December. If boundaries were IKEA, we finally found the Allen wrench in the junk drawer. If therapy handed out merit badges, mine would say, did not fix a grown man's weather baked instead. We washed dishes with the ease of people practicing rupture and repair without needing to say the phrase. He dried each plate fully, a small reverence I decided to count as a sacrament. Then I took a breath and opened a drawer I didn't want to. I won't be the person you practice criticism of your wife with, I said. Loyalty isn't a doorstop. It's a load-bearing wall. You can tell me your feelings. You cannot ask me for a co-counsel position.
He nodded. I want a mother, not a co-counsel. He paused. And a grandmother. Would you come to Sophie's art show next month? It's in a hallway with bad lighting. I specialize in bad lighting, I said. I bring my own weather. He leaned against the counter lighter now, as if the kitchen had returned some weight to the floor. I like this version of us, he said. Fewer speeches, more verbs. Don't get smug, I said, smiling. The verbs still require Tuesdays. He gathered his coat. At the door, he hesitated. I keep replaying the moment in court when the judge thanked you for your tone, he said. I didn't know tone could be a tool. It's a wrench, I said. It tightens the right bolts and refuses to strip the threads. He hugged me. No choreography, no public service announcement. Just the long, non-performative kind you give to someone who taught you your name. I love you, he said. I love you more than properly salted chicken, I said, which is my highest measurable unit. After he left the house, returned to its even hum. I washed a couple of cups we'd missed on purpose because it's nice to have something to do with your hands after a conversation that asked them to be still. I wrote 3 lines in my notebook for 2 a.m. Nora, who still sometimes asks if she deserves quiet. If love is furniture, choose load-bearing walls, not dramatic lamps. If apology is weather, give it verbs and a forecast, not just clouds. And me, I am still a mother on Tuesdays, by design, on all other days by breath. The porch light clicked on, obliging as ever. Somewhere down the block, a dog negotiated with the night. I set the note card back by the kettle so it could absorb the smell of tea and become part of the kitchen's memory. Tonight, I would sleep like a house with its roof inspected, not perfectly, but without flinching at the first suggestion of thunder. 6 months is enough time for a house to adopt your new gait. The clock no longer sounds like a metronome for panic. The printer clears its throat only when spoken to. The binder lives on the entry table like a cat present, dignified, low maintenance if you feed it on schedule. Tuesdays with Gabriel Holt. The protective order sits in clarity like a sleeping lighthouse. My life, thank you for asking, has become pleasantly administrative. Elder wisdom of the day. Peace isn't a miracle, it's a maintenance plan with boring labels. If bedtime is a prayer, mine now goes backups run, kettle off, locks yes. On Wednesdays, I take my cardigan and my patients to the library's small meeting room B for a free workshop I put together. Receipts, not rumors. A gentle guide to guardian shipwreck prevention. The room smells like paperbacks and determination. We seat 12, which is the number of chairs, plus the optimism of folding 2 more from the closet. people arrive the way truth does tired, hopeful, carrying envelopes.
I start with tone because tone is the wrench that tightens the right bolts. Good evening. We're going to be kind to ourselves and specific with everyone else. We go around with first names and one calm goal. I want my daughter to stop calling the pharmacy, says a man with a construction foreman jaw. I want to set a boundary. I won't apologize for, says a nurse who has negotiated 1,000 alarms and is done negotiating with people's imaginations. Odd fact of the day, the word minute of time and minute tiny share a root minuta, small. I tell them this because most of our moves are minute and also minute, and that is not a contradiction. It's a method.
We build their binders together. TAPS timeline, health finance, home systems, alternatives, chain contacts. I give templates that fit on one page because panic can't read multi-page PDFs. The vendor notice reads no changes without me in person with ID. Log attempts and email counsel. The doctor letter says no third-party clarifications without my consent. See attached proxy. The safety plan is a menu nurse check-ins text alerts, a narrow springing POA held in escrow Tuesdays that someone can actually name. Think of your life as a system that deserves both oxygen and doors. I say, sliding a box of pens down the table like communion. We're not staging a coup, we're installing hinges. Academic phrase for tonight, collective efficacy, the shared belief a community can solve its problems. It's not just a police theory buzzword. You can feel it when 12 people in a library choose calm paperwork over chaos and discover they're not the only adult in the room. The air warms, pens move, shoulders drop. We practice chain of custody for home devices the same way you'd practice a fire drill, serious face, gentle voice. We export a sample clip, generate checksums, sign our names like we mean them, and seal a disc with the solemnity of church ladies safeguarding a pie recipe. Boring is a flex, I tell them, and their laughter sounds like relief. 3 jokes because lungs are part of the curriculum. If laminators were therapy, we'd all leave here emotionally glossy. If boundaries were a kitchen gadget, they'd be the colander. Let the water through, keep what nourishes. If concern charged rent for all the rooms it occupies, your binder would be beachfront property. Between sessions, I meet with 2 staffers from the foundation that manages the scholarship fund I started when I got tired of adjectives. We shape the rubric to count grit, as well as grades, caregiving hours, night shifts, showing up to class with laundry on your mind, and still passing the quiz. I write short letters to each recipient in a neat hand my high school English teacher would recognize. I admire the way you named your competence. Paper that blesses instead of bites, it's becoming my favorite genre. At home, I work on a document I wish no one had to write, but everyone should be allowed to a victim impact statement requested by the city attorney's office for its review of the smells like toast incident and coached declarations. I resist the urge to narrate pain as proof. I do not perform outrage. I write in the voice I now trust, brief, specific, archival. I describe the morning knock, the adjectives on the petition, the rearrangement of my days to make room for a courthouse's weather. I note the cost, practical records fees, postage time, and physiological sleep that learned bad habits, a heart that thought it was a drum. I include a paragraph I wish were standard in government forms what worked. The judge's insistence on less restrictive alternatives. The preservation order. The neutral download. The kindness of clerks who believe in pens. I end with what would reduce harm for others. A bench card for judges titled Emergency Ex Parte by Default, a 1-page vendor notice template distributed through senior centers, and a citywide pre-bunking campaign that teaches people to ask dates, signatures path to verification
before repeating claims about a neighbor's mind. I sign my name with ordinary ink and the fun muscle that late life gives you. You can be gentle and still weigh enough. Saturdays are for the market and the ordinary administrative romance of groceries. I have a new superstition. Buy lemons, buy stamps, buy one kind of flower that doesn't look like it's trying too hard. Paper and citrus do an honest job of brightening a kitchen. So, do small questions with edible answers. What soup? Gabriel shows up most Tuesdays sometimes with Sophie and Noah and a Lego set that refuses instruction and therefore belongs in this house. He brings stories without villains, which is a skill. We practice a domestic version of procedural justice. If you broke it, name it. If you fix it, tell me what you did. If you can't fix it, leave a note and a cookie. The kids like the cookie clause, so do the adults. The protective order has an expiration date, which is how you know it was written by someone who respects mornings. I set a reminder 2 months early, renew or release. I like that I could choose release. I like even more that I don't have to. Systems that don't hold you hostage are the keepers. Sometimes women come up to me after the workshop and say, I wish I'd known this before my sister took over my life, with a smile. We stand in the doorway and make a small benediction out of stationery. I tell them to keep one folder labeled Grace because not every hard thing benefits from a tab, and to keep one labeled No because every binder deserves a door. I also keep one ritual for myself that looks silly on paper and works in practice. I read my pocket card like a bedtime story once a week. I see contacts proxy, no. Guardianship, see advance directive, and the line about returning me with a scone. I want my nervous system to memorize the route home with humor included. A few embers still glow out there, an old post being shared by someone who prefers story over correction, an email from a resource that is really a funnel for control. I don't stamp them out with fury anymore. I reroute with epistemic hygiene. Please see the attached order. For further questions, counsel is CC'd. The reply silence tastes like water. 3 more jokes to keep my feet light. If adulthood had a soundtrack, mine is the printer warming up and then deciding we can behave. If Serenity issued library cards, I'd finally return the past due drama and pay the fine with exact change. If Legacy had a dress code, it would be clean shoes and labeled folders, not a cape. I promised myself in part 1 I would not become a professional defendant in my own life. I am not. I am a person who keeps Tuesday dinners, who names her competence once a day, who teaches strangers how to notarize a calm. I also nap. Naps are policy. Before bed, I stand at the sink and practice the smallest benediction I know speak well over your name, Nora. I say to the window that's about to turn into a mirror, you did today, at the speed of paper, which is the speed of the human nervous system when it's trying to be kind. The porch light clicks on exactly when it should, as if it were agreeing. I write 3 lines for 2 a.m., Nora, because she still drops by sometimes just to check the locks. If rumor is a sparkler, lovely and loud, remember it burns out. Water and paperwork don't. If care asks you to shrink, offer it a chair and a consent form instead. And me, I am smaller than spectacle and stronger than gossip, which is to say, exactly my size. I turn off the lamp. The kettle polite waits for morning to ask. The binder blinks once in the moonlight like a cat and goes back to being exactly what I need, not a sword, not a shrine, an index that makes sleep braver. By the time the maple out front remembered how to turn gold again, my house had adopted my new gate entirely. The binder sat on the entry table like a cat that knows when to be decorative and when to be a doorstop. Tuesdays held. The printer spoke only when spoken to. I could feel the season asking a gentle question. What will you keep? What will you bless and release? I answered by setting up the camera on the kitchen counter. just left of the kettle's favorite square of light. No ring light. Peace doesn't need contouring. I pressed record and watched my own face arrange itself into the one I trust, now calm, amused, unwilling to audition for panic. Good evening, I said to the lens, which is to say to you, which is to say to whoever needs this exact sentence tonight. Let's practice a small art. Bring your documents, bring your humor, and keep your autonomy within reach. I wasn't making content, I was leaving a map. I told the story without sparkle, the morning knock, the adjectives, the courtroom, weather, the house with its long memory. I named the tools that proved more powerful than volume receipts, not rumors. Safety without seizure of rights. Chain of custody. A Tuesday dinner with verbs. I promised I would never pretend paperwork is poetry and then admitted a quiet truth. Sometimes it rhymes anyway. Elder wisdom of the night, peace is not luck. It's design plus maintenance. Luck is a weather report. Design is a roof. Maintenance is the part where you climb the ladder twice a year and thank the shingles for their service. Odd fact for your pocket goodbye began as God be with ye. We shaved it down over centuries until it fit in a hurry. Blessings do that long at first, and then if you've done the work, you can nod and say less. I offered 3 jokes to keep the lungs on speaking terms with the rest of us. If Serenity had a gym, I'm the lady on the recumbent bike reading the warranty for her toaster. If boundaries were a kitchen gadget, mine is the timer it dings before something burns and never apologizes for interrupting. If paperwork were cardio, my resting heart rate is notarized. Then I gave the part that matters instructions. Write a 1-page safety plan in plain English. Put your doctor's letter and proxies on top. Teach your bank the phrase you'll say when they call you back. Export your home system logs once a week and label like you're making jam for a picky aunt. Choose a Tuesday and defend it with your whole calendar. And when someone tries to recruit your fear to do their work, ask for dates, signatures, and the path to verification. If they bring adjectives, you bring nouns. Academic phrase for the nerds among us, which is also me. Implementation intentions, the psychology trick of deciding your if-then ahead of time. If a rumor arrives, then I forward the vendor notice and CC counsel. If my heart races at 2 a.m., then I drink water, reread the pocket card, and move 1 piece of paper from in to done. If a loved one tries to place me in a triangle, then I offer a Tuesday instead of a debate. This is not magic. It is choreography that your nervous system can learn. Between takes, I paused to stir soup. The camera caught the steam and pretended it was special effects. It wasn't. It was dinner. I returned and spoke a benediction I had practiced in the sink's reflection. May you be exactly your size, no smaller to soothe someone, no larger to confiscate the room. May your receipts outrun rumor. May your humor survive the paperwork. May your peace be designed, labeled, and still warm. I turned the camera off and wrote the words by hand too, because video travels fast and paper travels far. I slid a copy into the Grace tab and another into Legacy, where the scholarship thank you notes live, with Edward's nutmeg recipe and the children's drawings of improbable dinosaurs. I like my benedictions with a filing system. Later, I walked the perimeter like I do lock stove windows plants. The porch light clicked on at its appointed hour, an obedient star. I thought about Olivia, not the villain of this story, just the loudest learner, and wished her a kind teacher that isn't a judge next time. I thought about Gabriel and his Tuesdays and the way a grown man can become useful without becoming loud. I thought about Miss Turner and Mr. Dale and hoped their wreath and lawn could rest. I thought about the judge and the clerk and the bailiff and all the people who keep a courthouse's weather breathable. I pictured Patricia's eyebrows doing their little cartwheels when logic lands, and I laughed in my quiet kitchen. Field research confirms that friendship is an indoor sport. I also wrote the part that honesty requires I am not over it. I am through it, which is different. Some nights, my heart still volunteers for drums, and some mornings my hand shakes when the mail is thick. That is not failure. That is bounded rationality, the mind's way of budgeting attention after a season of sirens. My job is not to become mythically serene. It is to keep the tools where I can reach them. Before bed, I took out the little recorder that fits in my palm and made one more file audio this time for the nights when eyes don't want light. Hello, I told the version of me who sometimes visits at 2 a.m. with a flashlight and a frown. We have dates, we have allies, we have a Tuesday. The kettle is off, the locks are set, the house remembers. You may sleep. I played it back once, smiled at my own voice like it was a good dog, and put it in the drawer with the extra batteries. Then I did the smallest ritual I know that still changes my breathing. I read my pocket card out loud. Eyes contact, proxy, no guardianship, see advance directive. In that line I wrote, on a brave day, if found adorable but lost, please return with a scone. It works every time. Fear gets the joke and sits down. The maple outside let go of one leaf, then another. I turned off the kitchen light, and the window turned into a mirror that didn't mind my face. Quiet arrived like an old friend. The binder blinked once in moonlight and went back to being my favorite noun and index. 3 last lines for the archive and the road. If rumor is theater, your benediction is house lights up, time to go home. If care arrives with choreography, give it a chair, not the stage.
And me, I am not a case, not a cautionary tale, not an object lesson. I am Nora, exactly my size with envelopes. Nora Whitfield's morning begins with an emergency petition for guardianship filed by her daughter-in-law Olivia, claiming Nora is confused and unsafe. Rather than panic, Nora builds a folder. Receipts, not rumors, with stove smart plug logs, utility autopay confirmations, door camera timestamps, and a letter from her longtime physician, Dr. Rahman. In court, Olivia presents a consultant, Dr. Kellen, who never examined Nora Coach neighbor declarations, and a vague smells like toast incident. Nora counters with dates devices and calm cross-examination. The judge denies immediate relief, opts for less restrictive alternatives, and requests verification. When court reconvenes, Nora authenticates home system recordings with chain of custody, including audio of Olivia coaching neighbors and timing that aligns with fire, EMS, SAT logs closing the smoke call as unfounded. The judge orders preservation and a neutral download of phones. At review text show scripted phrases and stage paper trail without sirens. Dr. Kellen retracts his impression. The petition is denied with prejudice. A 1-year protective order forbids contact with Nora's providers or vendors except through counsel. Fees are awarded. A referral is made for potential sanctions. Nora hardens her systems without hardening her heart. Bank code words and callback scripts with Miss Patel, credit freezes and transfer holds, password manager and hardware keys, a P.O. box vendor notices weekly data exports, and a laminated pocket card. Tuesdays, with her son Gabriel, become a boundary-rich repair ritual, verbs, not adjectives, and grandchildren, Sophie and Noah, get a hallway lighting kind of love. 6 months on Nora teaches receipts, not rumors. At the library writes scholarship notes that bless specific grit and drafts a victim impact statement that praises procedural guardrails. Her benediction is simple and portable, bring documents, humor, and autonomy. Peace isn't luck, it's design plus maintenance. If seated near a metaphorical trash bin, rise carry envelopes, keep your Tuesdays, and let your house remember what rumor forgets.